Cathy. Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to meet you in person soon for your program coming up in April at Yogaville. But what you're doing is so unique, and I think a lot of people are going to be fascinated by it. So I want to start by asking you, what inspired you to combine yoga and horsemanship?
Good question. So first, thank you so much for having me here. Grateful to be on your podcast and sharing about this unique work that I do, and that I and my collaborator Kansas Carradine will be bringing to Yogaville in April. So we're very excited and grateful for the opportunity, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that and what that program looks like as we go on. But pairing yoga and horsemanship. Thank you for asking that. I'm a longtime yoga teacher of 34 years. I always say I was a born yogi because it has felt like it's been in my cells and since I was a child, even though at a young age I didn't really know a lot about yoga. There were so many elements of it that I was using in my life, unaware of that. And as I got older and more formally introduced to the practice just felt like coming home on so many levels. So I've been teaching a very long time. I'm very passionate about keeping yoga authentic, as I know Yogaville is, and integral yoga. Also, as a horsewoman and equestrian, I was noticing that I was applying yogic teachings to my horsemanship from ground to saddle. So I don't just mean riding. And as we like to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. So I was finding the mindfulness, the present moment awareness, the breathing awareness, those skills that I honed through yoga were naturally coming about in my horsemanship. So about 17 years ago, I created a program that I trademarked called Body, Mind, Equine. And basically, it was about how to use the whole of yoga, not just the postures, but the principles, the mindfulness, the energy awareness, the breathing awareness, how that pairs so nicely with our time with equines, and how the horses actually respond to that when we're in that cohesive, aligned state. Thus, the name of my program coming up there, Aligned Equestrians. And when I first started this program, Avi, a lot of my horse riding friends just thought it was a little out there, a little crazy. But I kept at it because I saw it was working. It was working for participants that were taking my clinics and my programs. They were finding better connection with their horse, better awareness, tools to stay harnessed in the present moment. So it was all just really flowing very nicely. And I continued on that path because that's what my inner voice called to me. And then fast forward about 2020, I published, or I didn't publish, my publisher published Yoga for Riders, which is a pretty comprehensive book. The publisher is Horse and Rider Books, and they are the leading publisher of equestrian reads. And I wasn't sure this was going to be in their wheelhouse. So when I submitted it to them, I was half surprised to get a yes back. And I, went into writing and putting all this program that I've been doing at ranches, resorts, equestrian centers into a book form. So that's a little bit about my journey, but I'm happy as we go on to dive a little bit more into specifics on where you could use yogic principles in horsemanship if you think that's of interest to your audience.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think what happens with yoga, listening to your story, right? It's like we dive deeply into yoga, right? And have those beneficial experiences, you could say, on the mat or on the cushion. And then we notice naturally, uh, while we're engaging in other activities that we're interested in our lives, that like, whoa, I'm tapping into that here now too. It doesn't need to be compartmentalized. And it's having a very positive effect. What I love with the equines that you say is like the energy that they feel, right? That you probably noticed, right? So especially working with them because they're another, living being that feels your energy. And it sounds like you are making progression in this relationship and the experience that both of you are having, and then thought to yourself, well, if I'm having this experience, if it's benefiting me, then there are probably others that could also benefit. And is that kind of how it unfolded?
Absolutely. And I had a few close riding friends and equestrian friends that were, let me kind of practice this stuff on them. So we would do little mini clinics and events. And these were people I really respected in the horse industry and listened to their feedback. And after we were done with a day or a 2-day clinic, they would say, Cathy, this, really had value. I feel like this or this is working better with my horse. I'm more present. I'm using the breath when I'm feeling nervous or challenged. So that validated for me that there was validity to the program. And really, Avi, over the years I've been involved in yoga and horsemanship, I've seen horsemanship change literally just over these last 5 years or so, kind of since my book published around that time, changing from sort of old school methods of horsemanship to more mindful horsemanship, heart centered horsemanship, more about the equine and not just using them as a vehicle to ride, but to actually partner with this other sentient being. So I've seen a shift in horsemanship as a whole, and I like to think I've had something to do with that shift. But it feels good, it feels right, and yeah, it's I think to what you said, when we can take the yoga off the mat and the meditation cushion and live it, that's really what the practice is about. Because if we're doing asana practice or breath work or meditation for an hour on the mat, what are we doing the other 23 hours of our day? Are we using this stuff, or is it a compartmentalized practice? And I think where we really begin to live yoga is when we do start using the practice and the practice, as you know, there's so many things that fall under that umbrella of what that looks like and how and where we can practice that off of the mat.
Yeah. Do you have any stories or experiences to share of when you or someone else were kind of out of alignment, you could say, and the way the horse was responding, and then you yourself, you know, deepening your experiencing, finding that internal peace, through the yoga practices, and then watching it have an effect on the horse itself?
Many, many, many stories. And I teach clinics and retreats. Multi-day retreats are my favorite. I often do them at guest ranches. So participants are partnered with a horse for 3 or 4 days, and we're doing connectivity work in the arena, but we're also trail riding. We're doing mindful grooming. And I mean, there are so many moments I could share with you, but just a couple of personal experiences. What I was noticing early on when I was forming my Body Mind Equine program, if I would go down to my barn and I was rushed, I was task oriented, I didn't meditate or do yoga that morning, my interactions with my horses were still okay, but there was a little energy of disjointedness to that. Maybe they just didn't respond as well to what I was asking, or just their body language was not really connecting with me. They were sort of in their own energy space and didn't want to partner with energy that was not congruent. Does that make sense? Just like we don't want to be around somebody who's rushed or angry. It just doesn't feel good. Horses are highly in tune beings, so they pick up on that all the time. The science is now showing they can feel our heartbeat, our nervous system from a good distance away, let alone anytime we pick up the reins or the lead line. I feel like we're directly transmitting. So there are these beautiful mirrors of showing us when we're out of balance, when we're not congruent body, mind, and spirit. And another experience that I talk about in my book, I'm an avid backcountry trail rider here in the Smoky Mountains. And I remember years ago doing a 3 mile stretch of trail that was a little narrow ridge. It seemed like it was 6 inches wide. It probably was a bit wider, but I was just holding my breath the whole time. And there were sheer drop offs on each side. And every time my horse would step or take a little stumble, I would be like, really holding my breath. And to remind myself in those situations, oh, breathe through challenges, just like we might do on the yoga mat. If we got in a challenging yoga posture, we're breathing through those challenges and using the breath in situations like that on the trail not only breathed me into calm, but it breathed my horse into calm. They're very sensitive beings. They literally can feel a fly landing on their back. So they know when you're up on their back and you've got death grip on the reins, or you're clenching your jaw, you're clenching your legs, or you're holding your breath. And as soon as we release, you can see the horse's head drop, you can feel them
Mm.
take a deeper breath. And then just on a physical level, restrictions in our body, tightness, tensions, restrictions in our body actually restrict the horse's movement. So you can even feel their stride change when you relax, when you soften, when you're symmetrical in the saddle, when you're more present. So there's just so many moments, and a lot of these moments are subtleties. They're not big wow moments that maybe another person would even see, but that's the beautiful part of doing the retreats, is we do kind of break it down and people are observing what's happening, and we talk about those little subtleties, but how significant they are to enhancing our relationship with our equines and becoming a more mindful equestrian.
Mm. Yeah, you're making me consider that there's there's often this moment that may or may not happen, in our experience where mm, we're we're caught in stress, right? I think fear is such a gripper,
Mm.
right? So visualizing, being on this, ridge, narrow ridge with a drop off on either end, something like that can really take over, and there's nothing else, right? There's just the stress and the wanting to get through the experience. And so often, I think that that just carries us, like in those moments of anger, fear, frustration. We just keep going until something changes, eventually, right? And have that experience, that fearful experience for an extended period of time. But our yoga practices have the ability to shorten that, transform that, right? First, I heard you speak about awareness before. First I have to be aware of the state that I'm in order to change it, right? Like if I'm not even aware, honest with myself, that I am feeling stress, fear, then nothing different is likely to happen. But if I'm aware of it, then I can choose to make a conscious choice. Okay, deepen the breath, which is usually, the gateway. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, what is your experience in those moments, um, noticing for yourself, or how can you simply be aware more of the time?
Great question. Awareness is really what my program is about. So often at my events, I'll ask the participants, like, what makes a good rider? What makes a good horse person? And people will say all kinds of stuff like, training and skill and balance and strength. And those are not wrong answers. They tie in. The one thing I rarely hear is the word awareness. And I always say that's what makes the best equestrian, whether you're leading your horse with awareness, whether you're riding your horse, whether you're an eventer, it doesn't matter what discipline of horsemanship, awareness is the key. And I always say in teaching yoga practice, it's not about flexibility. It's not about athletic ability. It's certainly not about competition. What is yoga about? One word, it's awareness. It's an awareness practice. It's an opportunity for us to become more aware of ourselves, body, mind, and spirit, and hopefully spending that integrated time again on the mat, on the meditation cushion. And then we start to naturally carry that awareness with us into our daily lives and into our time with equines. And you talk about fear. Horses are great button pushers for that, and because you're dealing with a 1,200-pound flight animal, so it's an opportunity to watch those tensions, fears, anxieties arise, and through awareness, then use the tools that we've learned through yoga to help level that playing field. It may not make your fear go completely away or your anxiety go completely away, but it does level the playing field a little bit to help us through those challenging moments. Because not only do we get into challenging yoga postures or challenging situations with our horse, life often puts us in challenging life postures. And to have those same tools to, oh, my body's feeling tense. Oh, I have the awareness, I'm clenching my jaw. Let me breathe to those areas. Let me consciously release tension from those areas. Let me move my shoulders, they're feeling tight. So yeah, awareness is the key. And then I think secondly is having practiced enough on the mat and on the meditation cushion that we can hone those skills when we need to. You know, I've heard so many teachers over the years, they practice when the waters are calm, which is why we practice daily. And this way, when things are a little tumultuous, whether that's in our lives or with our horses, we have those tools to in our back pocket, literally, that we can bring out anytime. The tool of breath, the tool of movement or present moment awareness. So I think, you know, awareness and then having the tools to use them really pair well and are necessary. Because if you have awareness, oh, I'm feeling tension, but you don't have any tools or skills to how to offset that, then the awareness really isn't supported, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I also, from my experience, I've really learned that awareness is the key. That if I'm aware, mm, it's not like it can be very helpful to know what to do with that, to know what to do next. But also, there's a power in awareness itself. That
Oh,
just by being aware, something seems to unlock, like the solution takes care of itself. But the real
mhm.
obstacle is a lack of awareness and investigating what is preventing me, what is between me and the awareness, you know?
Beautiful. That's well said. Yeah, I agree. I think awareness, like I said, this is the key in yoga practice, in horsemanship, and really anywhere, Avi, that I'm using the word horsemanship, you could really just plug in the word lifemanship because it's
Yeah.
just, you know, whether you're doing the yoga of hiking, the yoga of kayaking, the yoga of eating, the yoga of listening, or the yoga of horsemanship, it's all yoga, which is the practice of unity consciousness. And I think that awareness is. Um, honed when we are taking care of our three-part beings, taking care of our bodies, our minds, and our spirit. And I find for me personally, if I am out of alignment there, maybe I'm spending too much time in my head, not taking enough care of my body, or not taking enough time for my spiritual life or my sadhana, I become out of balance. And to me, that affects my awareness ability. So I find, which is what the ashram life is all about, living well, eating well, having a consistent practice, being around like minded people, all of that helps us to nurture the body, mind, and spirit. And then I think when we're in that balanced place, awareness can spring forth, and not just awareness, but knowledge, information, clarity, wisdom. So much springs from awareness. So I think that could be, you know, the key word here of our conversation.
Mm. I get the sense that you have such a deep rooted belief, a knowing that the energy that you're feeling inside of you has an effect on those around you, not only people, you know, all living things, right?
Yeah.
Which to me is a giant step. Actually, is to be aware of that, and it's somewhat uncommon. I think there seems to be a notion that what's happening internally is private, right? Like, it,
Mm.
you know, or maybe we'll say things here and there, yeah, like energy this, energy that, but to really believe it, to know that what's happening inside of you has an effect on everything external, whether it's the horse or your partner or whatnot. To me, that's transformative because it gives motivation to do this inner work because now it's not just about me, it's about having a positive influence on what's around me as well.
I agree 100%. And again, the horses are great mirrors for that, because they're very quick to point out when we're not present, when we're not aligned. And so, my side of the program that I'll be doing at Yogaville, and really what my program is based on, is experiential. These are things that I have self learned through dealing with and being present with horses. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't. I see these awarenesses and these aha moments through the participants that attend. So mine is very experiential, and so I come from that place, and I love for people to have those direct experiences. But we have all different types of learners, right? So Kansas Carradine, who is my collaborator and co-teacher on aligned equestrians there at Yogaville, she has a lot of experience as well, but also a very scientific based um, way of presenting. I was looking at some of the PowerPoints that she'll be sharing, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It shows scientifically with different monitors of monitoring when we're in that coherent space, and how that affects others around us, and including our equine. So there is even science that is supporting this. It's not just some, woo woo kind of approach to horsemanship, and it certainly doesn't negate good and safe and proper horsemanship. So I'm so excited to partner with Kansas, because we really speak the same language, but sort of in different ways. So I think it'll be a really wonderful pairing and offering for your participants, the retreat attendees that come.
Can you talk a little bit about the unique relationship between human and horse? Right? I mean, it's so ancient, right? And I don't have a lot of experience myself, but
Yeah.
I get the sense that it's so incredibly special. So I'd love to hear you speak to that a bit.
Yeah, I will try to. That's a pretty broad subject, and it's like I find horses magical and soothing to be around, and some of my greatest teachers, I call them creature teachers, but then other people are around them, and it produces a great amount of anxiety. So, though I love horses, and the community that I am involved with very much enjoy being around horses, and partnering with them in a variety of ways, that's not everybody's experience. Some people can be around them and just feel their heart rate go up and their nervousness, or they absolutely don't want to ride, they lock down. But I think what those are also opportunities to come to know ourselves better, which is also what yoga is. And I think if you've been around horses, whether you call it holistic horsemanship or natural horsemanship or not, you can't help but have a integrative experience when dealing with an equine. If you're doing this on a regular basis, you build and form a relationship, just like our human relationships. They do bond with humans. It's beautiful to watch them bond with each other in the pastures, and also watch like the horse body language. And they are ancient, and they go back to so many different parts of history. There's a piece in my workshops that I call, the spiritual horse, and like, what is the significance? And then I know Native American culture talk a lot about animal totems. And one of the horse messages is guardian of travelers. If you're drawn to the horse, you likely have an adventurous spirit, a touch of gypsy in your soul. And it's interesting, because that is sort of what I find true with most horse people. So this goes back to ancient lore of so many cultures, where there's human horse relations and interactions, and they're just such beautiful, in tune, wise, and sensitive beings, and that's one of the reasons I like being around them. And again, I use the word creature teachers. I think if we're opened, they can show us our blind spots. Fears arising, what is that about? We can dissect and look more deeply into that. Simple practices like, I might get one person to lead this, or I might get three people to lead the same horse, independently and just watch how that horse's body language shifts with each person. So somebody may be like dragging the horse along, others, the horse is passing them up. And it's like, okay, what is it about us that's creating that experience? And then I like to tell people, look elsewhere in your life, because really, if you're over dominant with a horse, you're likely over dominant in other areas of your life. If you're so passive with the horse and it's walking all over you, you may want to look at, am I like that in other areas of my life as well? So I think that the part where we can learn, and as long as we're in this earth suit, I always say, on this earth school, we're here to learn, right? So yoga, life, and horsemanship, they're never ending journeys. There's really no end game. So I think that's why we keep pairing with horses. It feels good. It teaches us about ourselves, and it does push our buttons. And in some ways it's good to have our buttons pushed, because we can see what our reaction are when we're in different situations.
Mm. Do you think as we get older, there's a tendency to be less open to learning?
Well, in the horse world, I'm going to say it's just the opposite. And actually, that's my next book that I'm working on. The working title is called Riding Change. And one of the changes we experience as equestrians as we get older, and really as humans, our neural pathways thin. We tend to maybe have more fears and anxieties that weren't there when we were younger. So I find this group of sometimes what I call re-riders, people that used to be involved in horses and they've been busy raising kids and having careers. They're coming back to it as mature adults. And I find that there's more openness to learning. Those are actually, in my observation, the more eager learners. They see the value to this, to how this work can work elsewhere in our lives. They realize there's less margin for error, so they are more present. So I actually find as the equestrian community gets older, there's maybe a more openness to learning. I mean, my demographic is that comes to my events is probably 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's not to say I don't get younger participants, but I would say the vast majority are mature horse lovers.
What about for someone that is not necessarily a horse lover? It seems like a big thing to get into, to be introduced to like to take that initial first leap. Any recommendations for how to begin?
Yeah. Well, I think all of this work really can partner with any animal, and communication with any animal. And what does communication look like? It looks like not just words, but body language, energy. What energy are we bringing to our horses? What energy are we bringing to our lives? Um, but I feel like actually, do you mind recapping that question again for me, Avi?
Yeah, just for someone that might be interested in this. Wow, it sounds really cool and neat, but
Yeah.
it's big and I don't have any experience with horses, maybe I do practice yoga, but how do I get started with something like this? Yeah.
Right. Okay. Good point. Start gently and start with someone who is qualified. It's just like yoga. It's like you have people say, oh, I want to get into yoga, but I don't know where to go, or I don't
Mm.
know how. And, I've tried this form and it was too hard, or I got injured. And, so really just testing the waters, working with different instructors. But I think someone new to working with horses or wanting to be around horses should look for a person like myself, like Kansas Carradine, like some of these more mindful clinicians that are out there, and dip your toe in the waters. It doesn't mean to get involved with horses has to look like riding anymore. There are so many interesting ways from, equine facilitated therapy that is available, and what we call liberty work, which has nothing necessarily to do with riding. It's working on the ground with the horse. So there are so many other ways to get involved, volunteering at a therapeutic center, volunteering at a rescue, and sort of dipping your toe in the waters, like, okay, what does it feel like to be around these beings? And then that, can naturally change from, gee, I'm just volunteering once a week at this center to, I think maybe I'll take a lesson. It was much like my yoga journey early on. I remember as a late teen taking a class once a week and finding, wow, this once a week thing really is making like a difference in the rest of my week. And what would it be like if I added more to that? And what would it be like to learn the yamas and the niyamas and the philosophy of yoga? So sometimes dipping that toe in the water can generate that snowball effect. And I really am an advocate at my retreats. I always say it's open to any level of yoga or any level of horsemanship, that I'll work with you from where you are. So if your horsemanship simply looks like brushing a horse or breathing with a horse, we do some breathing exercises with them. That's okay. If your horsemanship looks like you're a high stakes eventer in the Olympics, that's okay too. So I think, like yoga, it can be suitable for anybody and everybody with some modifications.
Hmm. Do you think generally we underutilize the wisdom, the just the positivity of animals in general in our lives? Like I would say for most people, there's, aside from maybe having a dog or a cat, there's not really that much interaction with animals, right? And so do you ever kind of picture a world where there's more interaction between human and animals?
Yeah, and in my world there is, because that's the circles I move in. So most of the people in my world are, have multiple horses and multiple dogs and cats. I was talking to a friend the other day. I said, "Well, how many dogs do you have now?" And she said, "Oh, only six." And I laughed and I said, "Do you realize, like, to the average person, only six is a real lot of dogs?" Um, so yeah, in the world I'm involved in, I'm very involved with the animal lovers, and that's who pretty much comes to my events. But no, I couldn't imagine a world with lesser animals. It was a much like yoga, it was very much a organic interest to me as a very, very young child. I was always, rescuing dogs and cats, and got involved in the primate world for a while. And I think they are creature teachers. They have so much to teach us. And I think just being open to that, doesn't have to be a horse. But I think being open to that can enhance and enrich our lives in so many good ways.
Uh, yeah, I think about this a lot in relationship with technology, right? Like the technology, it's amazing and there's so many benefits from it, but there also seems to be a downside to be aware of, like just the, automobile, right? Like the invention of that, how that totally changed the world. Like, right, I live out here in Yogaville, about an hour from any major city or town, and most people that live here, we go to town pretty often, once a week, once every other week, and we can get supplies, we can get all sorts of different things, and in a way that has, though, prevented us from building more here, right? And also using the animals, right? Like especially the horse, right? Like what is the effect on the relationship between human and horse as a result of the invention of the automobile, right? Like
Yeah,
if that was not invented, all of us, most of us, would be horse riders, I imagine.
exactly. Yeah, it was certainly used as a means of transportation pre-automobile. And I think the other beautiful part that's worth a mention is we are all part of nature. And I think all this technology sometimes, through all of that, we forget that we're part of nature, and so are the animals. And to be able to interact with our world around us in a deeper way does help counterbalance, again, kind of help level that playing field, because we are so caught up in electronics and technology and the business world. And to step out of that sometime and just spend time with animals, whether it's your dog or your cat, or there are many times I just, now that my horse is a senior, we just partner by hanging out together at the barn. It may be giving him treats, it may be brushing him, it may be just standing next to him in the pasture and just just being. So I think, connectivity in nature has such a balancing and grounding effect as well. And not forgetting that we're part of nature. We're not all this technology. And, as we talk about in the yamas and the niyamas, right use of objects of, it's okay to have a computer, it's okay to have a TV, but to not overuse those things and to be mindful of utilizing objects in the right way, I think is a very yogic practice that we can apply to so many things in our technical lives.
Yeah, I agree. The question, how much, I think has become the most important question for me
Yeah.
in relation to everything in life. Like that's awareness, right? Asking that question, how much of this, even the things that I really love and feel totally, healthy and there could be an overdoing it, even that comes, and in a way, having that distance from the things that we really love creates uh, more gratitude, more appreciation for them. So
Yeah.
that's the big question, I think, in life. How much?
How much? Yeah, that's a good question. I know for me, I can feel when I'm out of balance. Again, going back to that nurturing body, mind, spirit. In some of my programs, I teach a very simple exercise because I'm not always teaching to yogis. At Yogaville, it's a little different environment than a Western dude ranch. So I really try to break things down into non-esoteric terms. So like each day, I would tell people to create a list, 3 columns: body, mind, and spirit. And what do you do to nurture your body? How do you nurture your spirit? How do you nurture your mind? And for each person, that's different. And each day to at least be pulling one of those things from each category. So I can feel when I'm out of balance, when I'm too much into technology, when I'm on my computer too much, when I haven't spent enough time in nature. That presents in my body, how it feels, or my reaction to things or to people. I know, if when I'm traveling, it can be hard to stay on my traditional sadhana practice, and I can feel that because I've been practicing for so long. We can feel, I think, when we become out of alignment. So I think, to your point, continuing to practice is what helps us to maybe gauge when something is too much and feeling a little out of balance. And I just believe in doing things when we're in the right energy space too, and honoring when the energy is not there. And I don't only apply that to yoga and to horses, but to my business life as well, which has many moving parts to it. I won't sign a contract or schedule a meeting or send an email if I just feel really tense, disjointed, fearful about something, angry, because I feel that everything we do emits energy, and I don't want that energy going out into the world on a contract or a conversation with somebody. So I think, just again, circling back to awareness,
Mm.
and I think if we really listen to that awareness, we do know what's too much, or when we're crossing that line.
Mm. So when you find yourself experiencing those moments, what do you have a certain practice or relationship to those moments that you engage in to kind of gently transition to move to a different kind of energy?
That's a great question. I'll apply it to horsemanship because, again, lifemanship, horsemanship. If you're an eventer and you are competing that day, you have to show up, or you're a trainer and you have to do lessons that day, you have to show up, just like we do in our lives, sometimes even when we're not really feeling it. So then we do use the tools like, okay, I'm feeling tense and uh, anxiety. Let me stop and at least do a 5-minute mini meditation. Let me connect with the breath. Let me stand outside and root my feet to the earth and see what I notice. Open up my perception more. So those are tools that I would use. And then I think, Avi, I think it's important to point out there are days that we don't need to manipulate the energy, and we just honor the energy, right? And
Mm.
say, okay, don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the capability of doing this today. Applying that to horse riding, there are days that I would, had plans with friends to do a trail ride or a camp trip. And I got up that morning and was just feeling nervous energy, whatever that was about. Maybe it was something I ate the day before. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe it's something going on in my life, right? There are so many things that affect our quality of consciousness. And I would call my friends that day and say, you know what? I'm just not feeling it. I'm just going to stay behind and groom my horse, or I'm just going to do a little short ride from the house. So I think there are times we don't always have to alter that energy, but sometimes accept it and adjust our external activities according to where our energy and headspace is.
Mm. Do you ever see it in a way as your responsibility to care for Cathy? Like your primary responsibility? There's a deeper part of yourself that is your own caretaker and trying to
Yeah.
figure out what is best for her. Do you ever see it through that lens?
Mhm. I do. I like to think of nurturing myself, my soul is my highest priority. And I think that's a good priority. I don't feel like it's a selfish priority. So for me, that looks like keeping a very balanced schedule. I know that's a trigger. If I have too many things on my plate at one time, I can get stressed and out of balance. So that's one way I care for me as I become, as I've gotten older, better about saying no to things or to scheduling things further out and not overpacking my schedule. Another trigger for me personally is not feeling prepared for something. If I'm going to do an event, I want to feel fully prepared. I know that cuts down on my stress level, my anxiety. Um, I live a very, very quiet, almost hermit like life here in the Smokies, except for when I go out and travel and teach. Next week, I'll be flying to Arizona and teaching a retreat there. So I go from being in a very quiet world to what I call out in the big world, right? And if I'm not taking care of myself in my quiet space, then that's going to filter over and I'm going to have a more challenging experience when I do have to go out into the world. So, yeah, I think the nurturance of our souls should always, always be our highest priority.
It's an interesting thing to consider. The nurturing of the soul. Like how do I nurture my soul? Right?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting question.
So that goes back to that little exercise that I share with participants. Three columns: body. How do you take care of your body? Well, for some people, working out. For other people, it's getting a massage. It's eating well. Different things for different people. How do we take care of our minds? Meditate. Maybe do puzzles to keep our mind sharp. How do we take care of our spirit, our soul? And again, for some people, that's being involved in church community and worship and fellowship. Other people, it's being involved in our personal sadhana, reading scripture, meditating. So what I think it's important to look at, how do we nurture our soul? What fills our soul? To me, being around horses and nature and like-minded people can be a way to fill my soul too. So I think really taking time in our lives to dissect, how do we take care of, how do we nurture our soul? What are some ways that we do that bring us that soul contentment?
Yeah.
And I think when
Some
we
question.
have that soul contentment, then we're looking less outside ourselves for that contentment.
Oh yeah. Like everything seems to just fall into place then after that, or as much as it possibly can. But some questions are so deep, I think the question is more important than the answer, even. Like just to sit with that question. How can I nurture the soul? It's like,
Yeah,
whoa. Like,
it's a big
like talk about an
question.
answer. That's the answer is the question in that one, I think. Mm, wow.
Yeah.
I also have been considering listening to you speak about speed, like internal speed,
Mm,
because often it seems to be a matter of speed, of slowing down internally. Um,
yeah.
so I wonder if you've noticed that within yourself and noticed the effect that that might have on the horse when we slow down, because I imagine their internal world is operating on a much slower more centered level than most of us. Yeah.
Yeah, have you taken my program, Avi? Because it sounds like you're spot on. So I actually have a handout, and it's also in my book, of what I call the parallels of yoga and horsemanship, and examine, like, am I doing this on my mat? Am I doing this in my horsemanship? Am I breathing through challenges on my mat? Am I breathing through challenges in my horsemanship? Am I present moment awareness on my mat? Am I present moment awareness in my horsemanship? And one of the parallels that's listed on there is slowing down. Am I using my yoga practice as an opportunity to slow down? Am I also slowing down with my equine partner, which they would very much appreciate? Now, I know there's so many forms of yoga out there, and I'm not judging or knocking any of them. But for me, I love a slower, mindful, meditative practice. My roots were in the Kripalanandaji lineage. Kripalu was taught as a very meditative style. I know Integral is a very meditative style from my time that I've been at the ashram there. And I think the mat gives us an opportunity to slow down and, again, hopefully to carry that over and slow down a little in our lives. Horses do not operate on linear time, so they're not out in the pasture like looking at their watch, and or even thinking about, hey, what that other horse do yesterday, or what trail are we going on tomorrow, right? That's all human projections. They're so in the present, they're in the here and the now where life is happening. And I think as humans, we miss the present by dwelling in the past, projecting into the future. We miss the here and the now. So by slowing down, we do get to experience the present more. And the horses appreciate that. Any horse person will tell you it is counterproductive to try to rush anything with horses.
Mm.
If you're trying to rush to load your horse in the trailer, that's the day the horse is going to decide he doesn't want to get into the trailer. And I'll catch myself, being a full on human out in the pasture, calling my horses, come on, guys, come on, we got to get into the barn. And I'm like looking at them, and they'll look at me and take a few steps and take a bite of grass. And then they'll take a few steps and take a bite of grass. And here's mom looking at her watch going, come on, I got to get back up to the house and cook supper. So they're always a reminder to me, like, hey, we don't operate on this linear time. We like this slower pace. We partner well. We have a more fruitful relationship when we do partner more slowly. So with horses, it's paramount. But even in life, Avi, I find, the mornings that I sit down and I meditate and I take that time to nurture myself, my interactions that day are slower. They're more mindful. My conversations with people go better. My reaction time to things has slowed down, just because, again, going back to the importance of practice. So I think slowing down is huge. And we're on a fast-paced treadmill. I mean, we're watching technology just, increase exponentially. It seems like daily. And I don't know about you, but like a year now seems like 3 months. It's just,
Mm.
time goes so fast. And just, right, slowing down, dialing it back. And I'm a big fan of being practical. I always say I'm a practical yogi. I'm not a real esoteric yogi. I like to teach people, how do we slow down in our lives? How do we bring this stuff? Like, here's an example I used to teach to corporate people. Every time your phone rings, instead of just picking up that phone on autopilot, every time that phone rings or that email pings in, to just stop and use that as an opportunity to take a deep breath. So if
Mm.
the phone rings, we take a deep breath. That slows us down, slows our blood pressure down, our heart rate down. And our conversation is then different than it would be if we answered that phone by not taking that pause. So just learning to do those pauses, I think, can change so much. And we all detect energy too. Like, it's not a mystical thing. We can walk into a room and, oh, it feels good to be here, or no, it doesn't. Or we can be around this person, it feels good to be around that person, or no, it doesn't. So we all know when we're around somebody, rushed and task oriented and kind of forcing things, we
Mm.
kind of cringe and pull back a little bit. So again, even taking that breath before responding to an email, before having a conversation, those are, I think, practical ways that we can slow down and pause.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in a few months here.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate what you're doing very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I am so looking forward to being back there. I led retreats there over the years, Launch Your Yoga Journey, and I think one or two others, and just always have a special place in my heart for Yogaville. And it was interesting how all this, kind of came about. I was really feeling a draw back to Yogaville. And Kansas and I were discussing ways to collaborate and what makes sense. And I thought, well, I'm going to reach out to Yogaville, and spoke with Narada there. And he was a pretty quick yes on this program. And that doesn't happen a lot in my world. Often it's 6 months of back and forth. And what is this about? And what's our part, etc. And it just all came about so organically. So I'm so excited to be there. I'm excited to have Kansas Carradine with me. She brings a wealth of wisdom and knowledge in life and in the horse world, and is very much a yogi. And I'm excited to introduce her to Yogaville too. So we can't wait to be there April 10th through the 13th for aligned equestrians.
Yeah, yeah, it's so great. When I saw the program come up, I was like, "Whoa, I haven't seen something like this before." Um, but yeah, Narda told me that people are really interested in it. So hopefully, the
Cool.
first of many to come. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And, I like to look at life as like stepping stones, and they all interconnect. And my previous relationship with Yogaville, it's like here it continues in a different way, in a different form. And I think just staying interested and curious also is very important in life, of how things transpire and develop. So it's that curiosity, I think, helps keep us young and excited and engaged about things too. So excited to be there. Looking forward to meeting you in person as well. And I'm always excited to see who shows up for these events.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.